morning. Thank everybody for coming out again. We're going to pick up where we left off yesterday and back into commissioner questions. So we'll start. Commissioner Carr, you have any questions? Continuing. Commissioner Stamps? And just to remind the witnesses, you're still under oath from yesterday, and everybody please speak into the mics. Thank you all.
Well, we had another great night last night of reading and rereading. I didn't realize that this stuff was in the same material that we had given to us before. This is the first time I saw it in a binder.
We can use this as a weapon.
All right, so my question is really on the same lines. Where do we see rates going in the future? In your planning of this year and next year and 5 years and 10 years, I'm pretty sure that you've done some type of analysis to chart out your rate trajectory over the next several years. What does that look like?
Yeah, so there are a number of factors there, right? I mean, I think the first thing to note is, in the stipulation, we agreed to no increase in 2025, and we want to be able to offer that. I think in the future, we certainly see that rates will be pressured by just inflation, like everything else is. So if you think about the cost of service, that includes whatever inflation happens. And then, the rates beyond that are dependent a little bit on, continued improvements that we have to make. We have 2-year timelines on those consent agreements, right? And you have to do the improvements, right? I mean, that's just kind of the rules, right? You have 2 years to complete it to get off that consent agreement. So that's going to increase rates as those improvements go into service. I think the other factor that's a little bit unknown is just customer count and growth in the state, right? Anytime we add more customers, we are able to spread those costs over more ratepayers, and that brings it down. So, knowing that we have more construction to do to get off of these consent agreements and get the compliance improvements done, we want to couple that with continued growth in customer count to make sure that all keeps the rates as low as they can be. And again, acknowledging that inflation can and should over time increase those rates slowly rather than big jumps all at once. So that's kind of where we see it. I don't necessarily have a number because there are so many variables, but I think directionally that's the answer.
Have you conducted an affordability assessment for each market that you've entered?
We do, and I'm not on the front end of our acquisitions, but when we do that, we do a median home value analysis. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, yes. So we do some analysis around median home values and income there, and so there certainly are some statistics there that the certain homes that we know would be severely, certain areas that we know would be severely impacted are not systems that we want to purchase. We think they're just not our targets. And so I'm not going to be able to say who we've said no to in the state, but I know as a process, we look at home values and income in those areas as part of our due diligence.
Have we done any analysis about where is the threshold of affordability? When you get to this amount, the folks in this area, in this community, literally cannot afford it. So have you done any analysis of what that tipping point is? Because yeah. I feel we've already surpassed that.
So there are some analyses that are available, and I believe it's EPA who has put those out, that there's a 2% number, and I don't remember off the top of my head if that is 2% of income or 2% of home value, but so we're looking at that as well, knowing that, according to federal government, they recognize that there's an affordability number, and, our metrics say we're not there. I mean, we could be close in some areas for sure, but we're not there.
So you're saying that the numbers you were referencing, there's a 2% number out there?
Yes, there is, and we would love to follow.
So based on your rate, what would a person need to make in order for your rate to be affordable?
I don't have the details in front of me, and again, I know conceptually that we do this. I'd love to provide it as a follow up. It's just not, I'm not on the front line of all that. I just kind of know conceptually what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a follow up off Commissioner Stamps. there were 2 or 3 people testified yesterday that their water and sewer was basically on par with their electricity bill. Is that kind of what you see in around? Is that kind of is that normal for your service areas that you know of?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure that we are tracking electricity bills close enough for me to speak intelligently about that.
Just to add on to that very, very quickly, I did do some analysis into all of those testimonies that we heard yesterday. I looked into that kind of power bill, water bill analysis. I was able to determine that the kind of usage, the consumption portion of those bills that were referenced ranged from like 11,000 gallons a month to 30,000 gallons a month. So just much, much higher than we would see. So in the specific instances we heard yesterday, I can speak directly to that, which is no, we generally don't have water customers using that much water, and so they generally don't rival the electric bills in that sense. Again, in the instances we heard yesterday.
But to your testimony yesterday, a lot of them aren't metered. You don't meter the water, so it'd be a flat rate, right?
Correct. The flat rate is much lower. We use, whenever we have flat rate water customers, we use an assumed usage of, subject to check, either in between 3,000 and 4,000. So they don't come close to that 11,000 to 30,000 range I just mentioned. They're much lower than that.
The number mentioned yesterday, 107.99, that would be metered and non-metered? I mean, that's just a flat rate, right, for sewer and water?
Depending on the service area, so like I know that the Oakland community is tier 3 flat rate water and flat rate sewer, and I believe they're the ones who mentioned that 107 number. Yes.
Is that water metered?
It's not. No.
Okay, so they could use 40,000 gallons and it wouldn't change, or 4,000, it wouldn't change that price at 107.99.
Correct, for the water and sewer for both services.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah. So that just kind of piggybacking on your statement that it was a high water usage to get to that, but or to equal the same. But in that instance, it wouldn't. It would be regardless of how little or how much they use. It'd be 107.99 in that instance.
For the flat rate, yes,
Okay.
with a surcharge.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Commissioner Brown, I'm sorry, I don't know what the proper protocol is here for me to talk, so hopefully I'm not violating any big laws or anything. But on that subject of tying water consumption into the sewage prices, I know there are, in my case, our area, we get our water from East Lowndes Water Association, and the sewage is now on Great River, and before it was on Wilco. The issue there with some areas is, okay, if you wanted to tie them together, how do you get the water company would then have to give the consumption numbers to the sewer company to figure out what the rate is. And my understand from talking to Senator Younger is that, and like I said yesterday, he's on the board for Prairie Land Water Association, and they do both. They have water and sewer. They tie them together, and he says that's by law. I don't know the law, so I'm not certain on that. That it's 1.25 times whatever the water consumption or the water rate is. That's what they get charged for sewer. The issue is, okay, can you get the water companies to pass on the information to the sewer companies where they are disconnected from each other so that the sewer companies have something to go on? And if they do, is that going to make an improvement on rates, or is that going to be even worse? I guess it depends on how much water you use. And is that going to, if we're to do that, then are companies like Great River going to be able to operate? Because if it's significantly lower, I don't know what that means to their ability to maintain and operate the systems and make some sort of a profit as well. My question is that possible? Can it be done? And that might be something, that may not be a good thing for this hearing, but something to consider.
Sure. I appreciate that comment. My comments were predicated on the fact that Mr. Silas was saying that the $107 or to study the difference between electric costs and water was like 10,000 gallons. And so some of them, they don't measure the water is my only point at that point. That it was $107.99 no matter how much you used or how little you used in that case.
Yeah, if it's not metered,
Yeah, right.
what else can you do?
Correct.
If it's not metered anywhere, what else can
Sure,
you do?
sure. So it was just, again, to clarify the analysis of the electricity costs versus what the sewer water costs were.
So, Mr. Chairman, I might can address a couple of the legal questions that Mr. Arnold asked, just maybe to help the discussion. So Mr. Arnold, the jurisdictional guidelines and authority of the Public Service Commission is more difficult to figure out than the constituents of a bowl of gumbo. In your particular case, you're being served water by a water association, and the commission has limited jurisdiction over those entities under state law. The short answer is no one can force that association to provide that information. Great River would have no control over auditing or verifying any of that information to the extent a customer had a question about their bill, which is problematic from Great River's customer service standpoint. I would like Aaron or somebody to elaborate on what I'm about to say, but from a sewer perspective, specifically, rates have to be designed to cover your cost, or at least under Mississippi law, that's what's required. And on the sewer side of service, the variability of use is of minor significance in terms of what the cost is to serve sewer to your household. It doesn't matter if you use 1,000 or 10,000 gallons. They're going to spend almost the exact same amount of money per household to service that household. And so it makes very little sense to meter sewer service. Mr. Silas, you can probably confirm this, but it's rare to have a metered sewer rate, not only in Mississippi, but nationwide. Albeit, I will admit, some utilities do tie it in the manner or similar to what you suggest. And that's because they control both. And they may lose money on the sewer side and make money on the water side, and they're fine with that. But Great River can't be in that situation because they don't control the water side, in your instance at least.
Okay, thank you. That does help a lot.
Commissioner Carr?
My comment to that, that's correct that you, in that analysis, I would somewhat agree with that. But from the citizen side, they're going to be controlling their water consumption by what they're going to be paying. So when you put the citizen's in control of how much he spends, he's going to control it as much as he can. So they're going to be frugal. So going to the next question, yesterday I asked a question about how much is your cost for water. Did y'all get that number for me, please?
No, we did not last night. We can continue to analyze, provide that, but we did not find it over the break.
Okay. So I had conversation with that question from an individual on the coast, and it was $1.50 for 1,000 gallons. And while we was here yesterday, moving to my next point, I received, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, can you elaborate on what that includes and doesn't include in terms of fixed costs, variable costs, treatment costs? Do you know?
I do not. That's all I was told is what was the water cost per 1,000 gallons getting it out of the ground. So I don't know if that was just getting it into the tank or when it went out to the citizen.
Or treated or untreated, you don't know that?
I did not get that.
Okay.
So moving to the next point, when we was here yesterday, and, you know, as y'all probably know, everybody's getting texts back and forth. So I got a picture, and I'd like to, if I can, hand it out to everybody, about some of the questions that our concerns, our citizens are concerned about, and the commissioners and myself are concerned about, is service. So here was one from
Commissioner,
Market.
Commissioner Carr, I'm sorry to interrupt. At this point, I'd like to raise an objection. Under the commission's rules for these proceedings that apply, specifically Rule 15.103, only parties are allowed to introduce new evidence into the record of which the commission or the commissioners are not a party of record. They're the actual trier of fact. And there's several issues associated with new evidence being introduced. In fact, the commission's rules do not allow new evidence that hasn't been traded among the parties prior to the commencement of the hearing. And that would be the situation with respect to any pictures that you've taken. One of the issues practical issues with that is these gentlemen haven't had time to inspect what the pictures represent, when they were taken, what happened before the picture was taken, what happened after the picture was taken. I don't have any witness that I can cross-examine about those facts and what the expertise of that person that took the picture was. And so for all of those reasons, I would object to the introduction of any evidence by the commissioners themselves. Obviously, I've had no issue with any questions about any of the evidence that's been presented, any of the testimony, any follow-up. All of that is obviously perfectly fine, but you know, that's just my objection for the introduction of new evidence that hasn't been shared among the parties prior to the commencement of the hearing, and specifically any generated by the commission itself. The commission has the ability to investigate utilities. That has a specific rule for doing so. It's Rule 15.102. That requires notice. It requires prior written, the ability for the utility to review the investigation, the reason for the investigations, and the ability to respond to those in writing. None of that procedure has been followed. Because this is not an investigatory proceeding, this is an FRP rate proceeding that's governed by the previous commission's orders and the FRP itself that was approved by the commission. And so for all those reasons, I do object. Again, I have no issue with you asking as many questions as you want about the testimony that's been provided, but that is my objection with respect to the introduction of new evidence that has not been provided to any party.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I ask?
Yes, sir.
Can you share the information with us?
I don't think there's an issue with him showing the picture to y'all. I think the objection is introducing it into evidence and making it part of the record.
Okay.
Hold on
Thank
one
you.
second. This is not a picture. This is not a picture. This is Great Rivers, from Great River to the
Picture of a
citizens.
Great River document.
This is y'all's document that was sent to our office.
Did I misunderstand?
Yesterday.
You had a picture.
Well, it is, it was a picture to me, but it's your letter that was sent, or Great Rivers letter, that was sent to my office. This has to do, you can see it. That says Great, or Central States. I'm confused about who we're talking about here. This is about service and quality. And they failed to do one of the basic standard things that they're supposed to do, is communicate with the health department. What we're talking about is communication and service. He's going to get y'all some copies. Okay.
Okay, so it appears, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Carr, it appears what this is a photocopy of a letter that was sent to a customer of Great River that was provided to you by a customer of Great River, it appears.
Yeah, it's from two different utilities. One was Gulf Park Estates, I think, and one was from Will Market Estates.
Okay, and I guess well, I'll just say this, I will maintain the same objections that I'm raising. Again, this is not, I do understand this is a document that was produced by Great River, notwithstanding, you know, this type of analysis is appropriately addressed in either a complaint proceeding or a investigative proceeding, neither of which this proceeding is. And that's the reason why I'm maintaining the objection. The other thing I would add is, while there's been discussion at a high level about service, we don't have our operations team here simply because that is not, in a rate case, is not directly relevant. Again, to address service issues, it's meant to be done through other procedures within the commission's rules. And so that is an objection I have to this line of questioning. But, you know, you understand my objection, and you can rule.
Mr. Manuel, your objection is noted. We're going to overrule it based on our testimony we heard, or what we heard yesterday. And if your witnesses will answer it to the best of their ability.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. You can continue, Mr. Commissioner Carr.
Yeah, do our witnesses have a copy?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
They do.
that's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel.
It's just ironic to me that we were talking about service in general yesterday, and we heard all of the complaints, or questions and comments, I should say, from the citizens and the ratepayers that was here yesterday, and there was a room full of them. And so hearing that was a small portion of what our office gets complaints about. And so, and it's ironic that this comes up the day that we're having a hearing about this. They sent a letter out and advising the citizens. And what's very confusing to me is that when they establish or come in and did their due diligence, and they purchased these facilities, they should have got a roll. It's kind of like if you have an apartment complex, you get a rent roll. You know what you're buying. So they knew they were buying these customers or these meters, because it may be on rental property or whatever it may be. So they should know who to send this to, and I'm getting to my point. At the bottom of that letter, it talks about, please share this information. To who? Who are they? And it says, you know, take it to the schools, to the apartments. You're asking the citizens to do your job, which they're paying you to do the job. So why are you asking a citizen? You're going to put them in a liability standpoint of sending this letter out, and it's noted. It's called a CYA, if I understand correctly. So y'all just throwing the blame at everybody to cover for y'all, and y'all are being paid to do a service. That's the whole point. It's the whole point that from May of last year to January this year, y'all bought 20 utility water sewers companies in the Southern District. And the calls have been ramping up at our office in the Southern District. Yeah, we got calls on the rates going up. We got that. We understand that. But we've had equal or more on service, brown water, not being able to get through to y'all. So I'm very concerned. I brought a comment up.
Commissioner Carr, would you mind if the witnesses just have a second to respond to what the document is from their perspective and what it's attempting to communicate?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, I heard one specific question that I wanted to address. The information at the bottom about sharing with all other people. I mean, we have billing addresses and mailing addresses to our connections, right? If there is a school that is our customer, then we send that letter to the mailing address of the school. What this document is asking people to do is to share that information, whoever gets that letter at the school, with all of the teachers, with all the students. I mean, what it's asking is whoever gets this letter that is responsible for a given property nursing home, school, we can't send the letters to the individuals in the nursing home, right? Because they don't have a different mailing address. So I just wanted to address that quickly.
Hold
I
on
don't
a
know
sec.
if
But you're also, like a nursing home, I get that. I worked and built nursing homes and care centers. I understand that. I know you take it, so it's a responsibility of the administrator. It's not the responsibility of the citizen that you send it to Mr. Smith down the road or Mr. Jones to take it to the nursing home or the hospital. That's your job.
I understand, and we do that, sir. I think the statement is general and vague because the same letter goes to all connections. And so we can definitely look into saying, if this isn't applicable to you, please don't worry about it. But the same person who is the administrator at the nursing home, they got the letter that the residential customer got as well, right? And so if a residential customer got this and they are not an administrator of a nursing home, we don't expect them to take it to the nursing home. The nursing home got that as well, right? The wording might be a little odd, but what I'll say is the idea of it is every single one of our connections got this. Schools, nursing homes, residential customers, etc. And it's really just about transparency, right? If a customer doesn't open their mail and their neighbor knows that, then what we're asking is, hey, I know that you don't generally open your mail. I just wanted to let you know this came in. It's really just about community, transparency, open communication. We're not necessarily saying, hey, we sent this to 10 customers and we expect you to go give it to every other customer in the service area, if that makes sense.
We're splitting hairs here. You said you can do this by posting this notice in a public place. That's what the letter says. Come from y'all. Or Central States or Great River. Everywhere says Great River at the top. You're asking someone else to perform a duty for you. So here's a legal question. What if this person receives this letter and doesn't do it? Does it notify the community? Are they liable? Because they didn't follow through? In other words, if I have someone that my neighbor, I see who the thief is that steals his lawnmower out of his, and I don't go to the police or the law enforcement and say, hey, Larry down the street took that. Am I part of the crime? That's a question. I don't know that answer. It's just a question. You're putting someone else in a liability standpoint, from my view.
Commissioner, I guess Mr. Stiles can probably agree, but if you've got some ideas of how to revise this communications, I'm more than certain Great River is willing to entertain any suggestions you or the other commissioners or the staff have. I don't think there's a legal liability issue here. They've gone above and beyond what is required by law, and so to suggest to post it in a public place is a belt and suspenders approach already. They wouldn't be required to do it, and neither would the recipient of the letter by law. And so I don't think there would be any liability associated with that fact.
Then why didn't they post it?
I'm sorry?
Why didn't Great River go out and post it in the community?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. I know we're going down a road that there's not going to
I
be
just
able.
don't think it's required by law. That's all I'm suggesting.
Then I don't understand why you put the disclaimer on the letter. So going back to the issue of this here, it's a simple task to do to take those samples. This gentleman right here, he lives in the city of Gulfport. He knows if there's a boil water notice out, he knows they come to his house because he's at the end of the line, if I understand. And that's where they get the sample from. So do y'all have in y'all's procedures of how often this is done? Because I'm not aware of how the health department rules because we don't have no jurisdiction over them. So, and I'm sure y'all do. So what happened here that you didn't take the water samples? Whose job is that? Is that your subcontractor? Is that his responsibility? Is that your responsibility? Whose responsibility it is Because I didn't hear yesterday that y'all had any employees in our state. They were all subcontractors. Is that correct?
We have a regional manager in the state of Mississippi who oversees our operations.
But is he a subcontractor?
He's not.
So he works in our state.
Yes, sir. He's an employee of Central States Water, but he works in the state of Mississippi, conducts site visits, oversees the operations department.
And then when did that take place?
I do not have a specific hiring date.
When did we hire that regional manager? Is that
Yes.
the question? It would have been, it's for quite some time, you know, at least 12 months.
You gotta know a date.
Excuse
You
me.
have to know a date. You gotta give us a date.
I don't have that date in front of me. I mean, it's been some time. It's not just yesterday, that's for sure.
Because the
Over.
commission has been asking for a regulatory person. That we know that y'all have interviewed people. But we haven't, I'm not aware of that person you're talking about.
That's a different role than what we're talking about. Regional manager is someone who
So what's
assigned
his
to state.
responsibilities? Is this his responsibilities?
So his responsibility is to oversee the contractors that we talked about yesterday. You know, certainly making sure they follow the procedures that are outlined as his responsibility. We also have an environmental health and safety team that's doing audits and handling our testing results and those kinds of things. And we have folks on that team who are assigned to Mississippi, but they don't live in Mississippi. And so, you know, we have two teams that are monitoring this and would be concerned that this happened. And one is the regional manager, and the other is our environmental health and safety team.
So you have one person for the whole state.
Currently, and as you suggested, we're interviewing for another position in the state, yes.
Correct. So how many counties are you in the state? We know, my point is, you have some in Oxford, Lafayette County, Lafayette County, depends on who you're talking to. So, and you have some on the coast, which is, you know, 6 hours away from each other. So who's pulling all these samples and giving them to the health department?
Yes, our contract operator is the one that are responsible for pulling the regulatory samples.
You're a certified operator?
Yes, our certified operators in the state.
Are they subcontractors?
Yes, it's H2O.
So the subcontractor, the certified operator in the Wool Market area, is it the same one in Gulf Park Estates, which they're in two different counties?
Yeah, I can't answer if that is the same individual or not. I know that H2O handles operations for us, and they have, they have 375 ops personnel throughout the state. So depending on the areas, the needs, they are regularly, routinely responsible for, deploying personnel to meet the needs and requirements of our facilities, work orders, call outs, those kind of things.
So is this a corporate, a legal question? Or is it who in upper management verifies and says, okay, we have a system operator that has checked the boxes and turned all this in to the health department, and here's our findings? Is there someone at corporate verifies this has been done or has not been done? Because this says it has not been done.
We have a work order process, sir, that allows our home office compliance team and operations team to review what I'll call checklists like this to say, has this been done? Has this been done? I'm not personally familiar with those checklists. I believe there are different different kinds, such as a weekly plant checklist, like, hey, whenever I'm on site, I can check this, this, and this. There are monthly checklists as well. So yes, there are procedures and processes in place to have people from our home office ensure that our operators are doing what they need to do. And if not, right, then coaching and process changes and procedures derive from that.
Your key word that I got out of your last statement was belief. So let's take it to the citizen for a second. Let's take it to an elderly person. Let's take it to a mother with a child, and they get this letter. That believe word don't work with them. You have to know this is done. You're being paid for a service. A necessity of life is water, and they get this. You can speak now, Leo.
Yeah, Commissioner, I do want to just object to this line of questioning at this point. As we laid out at the beginning of the proceeding, our witnesses are here to support the FRP filing, which this subject matter is completely irrelevant to. We have employees at Central States and Great River that can answer your questions. They're not witnessing and testifying here today simply because your questions are to be addressed in a totally different procedure under your own procedural rules. This proceeding has been morphed into a different proceeding that Great River wasn't asked to do and certainly wasn't notified about. And so while our witnesses are doing the absolute best they can to give you what they know they can't testify under oath to things that they don't know, and they're trying not to speculate, which is appropriate. But don't take these specific witnesses' ignorance as the company's entire ignorance. They're not the only 3 employees at Central States or Great River, is my only suggestion.
Mr. Manuel, your objection is noted, but I do agree that in the light of yesterday, with the questions that a lot of your customers and our constituents had, that witnesses should answer the questions to the best of their ability. Thank you.
I have no agreed.
Thank you.
To the best of their ability.
These are reports, and I'm not going to enter them in, but y'all have received these reports from the health department in the past. And then we get this yesterday in the same area. Same stuff, same failure, service. And I disagree wholeheartedly with the saying it's not relevant. It is relevant. These ratepayers are paying tremendous amounts of money for a service that is not being provided. It'd be no different if you went to the hamburger and bought a hamburger and asked for cheese and you didn't get a cheeseburger. You start questioning about the cheese. Well, I paid for the cheese. It's not there. They're paying for a service, a professional service. You're in a professional business. And you're asking people to overlook this. And those folks that were out there yesterday, you know how far it is from Vicksburg? Or Natchez, I'm sorry, from Natchez? You had 2 water providers that sold to y'all that disputed y'all's claims about, especially the one in Oakland and Natchez, that said the meters were working fine. He said he read them. The owner read them. So it is relevant, in my opinion, that we get their voices heard. They're paying for a service that's not being provided to what they're paying for. They don't send y'all. They don't pay y'all what they think. They pay y'all what y'all send to them.
And Commissioner, to piggyback on that, all the rates are calculated based on all the services provided. So I think that's the issue that you're pointing out, is that all the rates are based on all these services that are provided, and we're just you're just questioning the services.
Um, So it's a statewide rate,
Yes, sir.
statewide rate.
Same rates, same tariff applies to all customers statewide.
I get that.
Every expense that y'all incur goes back to the rate. So these questions that are being asked are basically asking about every expense that you incur. That goes into the rate. So whether it's a piece of paper, an email, it all had a cost that goes back into the rate. So that's kind of how I'm tying all of this together. All this is an expense that should be looked at. Because I just see a bunch of more layers on the bed. The people were getting the service, y'all bought the companies, and now you added all these layers of oversight and expenses that they got to pay for.
Yeah, Commissioner, I guess to just reiterate my position from a different angle and to respond to what you and Commissioner Carr just mentioned. Anecdotes about service are inherently one-sided, and you can't expect humans to know every piece of history about every single customer statewide. That is why there are proceedings, complaint proceedings and investigatory proceedings to adjudicate those and to get both sides of the story. But it's unreasonable to expect a detailed explanation on the fly and to suggest that the comments that were spoken yesterday is endemic and the experience of every customer along the state is troubling to me, mostly because we don't have an opportunity. None of the complaints received by the commission have been provided to us to date, received calls, emails, or anything. We're happy to respond to them. We've asked for them, and that communication hadn't occurred. They deserve a right to respond in a prepared manner with evidence. And I had no ability to challenge the credibility of any of the statements that were made yesterday. Okay, we've tried to look up some of the things, and we'll get into that in our redirect. And so hopefully that will actually support what I'm trying to tell you about why there are certain procedures for certain things. Our rate is not just to recover the cost of service, by the way. We have debt service. We've got assets that have been purchased. All of that goes in our rate. And so, it's all been reviewed. It's all been deemed reasonable by your experts and by the experts that are third-party experts that's been hired. And so I agree, if there wants to be a discussion about the cost and what is reasonable and unreasonable about our cost, that is what our people are here to talk about.
Okay.
But what instead we're talking about is anecdotes of service complaints that we have no prior notice or knowledge of and have no ability to prepare a response in real time. That is in the crux of my issue with this.
I'm okay with a delayed response. If there's something that's brought up that you need more time, you can't answer today, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
So when was this is a question, Mr. Leo, when was the original rate filing, the first one?
Our initial rate filing was filed July 25th, 2022.
22?
July 25th, 2022.
Okay. So as I said earlier, the 20 systems that y'all bought out in the Southern District was from May of 23 till they finally closed out in January or February of this year. So where was their comment at, objecting to this buyout? Did they have a voice? That's a question that I'm asking.
Sure. Great question. So every customer that was a customer of Great River at the time this rate filing was filed was provided individual notice by mail. There's publication notice as well. Now, to your point, systems acquired after the date of this rate case would not have received notice of that rate case. However, for every acquisition that Great River has made in the state of Mississippi, in every proceeding, the individual customers to be acquired were notified voluntarily by Great River because it was not required by law or your rules. But we notified them of our intent to acquire their system, and they could have intervened and, provided their input in that proceeding. I would note that for every proceeding to date, there's been no party intervened in any acquisition case that Great River has had to date.
So they was not allowed if it was, they didn't know they were being bought out if it was a year later.
No, sir, I disagree with that statement. We sent a letter to every customer, to your point, of the 13 or so systems that were acquired and closed on in January of this year. When within 20 days of filing our petition to request commission approval for that acquisition, every single one of those customers was mailed a letter to tell them, and they were told in that letter how to intervene, the time limit in which to do so, the procedure in which to do so. I can tell you from experience, some of which actually inquired and called up to the commission to ask about the procedure and how to do it. And that information was again provided to them by your staff, not your staff at the time, but the Public Service Commission staff. And all I'm suggesting to you is, to date, no one has intervened in any of those proceedings. They certainly could have, and they could have voiced any concerns they have about Great River or their service quality at that time.
You think they would have intervened if they'd have known what they were going to be getting into?
I've known of people to intervene in proceedings. Mr. Arnold intervened today.
But is he coming before or after the initial rate filing?
Oh, well, to be fair, the customers of the systems you're discussing that were acquired recently in your district, their rate did not change upon acquisition. The first time their rate change was pursuant to the proceeding that we're here today to talk about, and they absolutely received notice of that proceeding, of this proceeding. And again, none of them intervened. Every single one of them received individual mailed notice that told them that we were requesting a rate increase, what that rate increase would be, where to go find the rates that we were proposing to charge. This was all posted on the internet for them to review. In fact, we provided to each of your commission's offices copies of all the communications we provided to those customers, just in case you received phone calls in response to the notices that we sent.
But the question was, do you think they would have intervened if they would have known the rates were going to be this high?
I cannot speculate as to how customers react to rate requests. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, since my name was used earlier, and that's perfectly okay with me, initially when this came about, I don't remember if it was for this particular rate increase or if it was a mailing that was sent out on the initial acquisition. I have never intervened as in the capacity I have right now. But I have sent, I can't come up with a better word for it than complaints to the commission, and that was the previous commission, that was not you guys, that rates, I think I was talking about rates going up. It's been well over a year, and I'm 103 years old, so I can't remember all the details.
We
can look good for
I
your age.
have in the past. I have submitted, as I recall, a written statement that I don't like this, I don't want this. And then that's probably why they had my information, my email address. I probably did it via email. That's why they had their email address, and why that I believe Commissioner Brown, his people, had my name and offered me the opportunity to intervene. And I am finding that this is a much more complicated situation than I ever envisioned. I came into this entire thing with the attitude the rates are too darn high. And I've learned quite a bit over the last 2 days. And it's a difficult situation, a difficult thing. I'm glad I'm not a commissioner and has to make the final decision one way or another. But I have people, I don't know, I haven't on anything at this level, but people have intervened in the past. At least one person has intervened, or at least given his opinion in the past.
One follow-up, Mr. Manuel. It's our understanding that when the systems, the service and improvements to the failing systems that Central States Great River acquired, there were stipulations agreed to so that Great River would receive the rate plan that they received, certain improvements they would make in a certain amount of time. So I think that too is part of what we're talking about, which would be, again, in the same vein of where we're trying to get to. Now, I understand that we're getting broad. A lot of this is being brought up by our mutual, your customers and our constituents. So we're trying to discern the level of quality of service, which was in part stipulated in the purchase of these systems. In part. So at the rate that was established, because it's the first time it's ever been done in Mississippi. We don't have a private company that has this big a system. So the previous commission had them in and then tried to do some kind of structure to chaos. And that's not a negative thing. When you buy, I think there's 15 or 20 in the north and Commissioner Carr, more in the south. Trying to say grace over all this. And so the previous commission, in my understanding, said, okay, under the stipulations, we're going to give you this rate plan, or this plan to get you started. There's stipulations you need to make these certain repairs and upgrades. I think that's the question that Commissioner Carr is kind of getting at, and where we're kind of getting at, where I think a lot of their constituents are pointing to. What assurance do we have that those stipulations were achieved and which ones weren't? Because it is germane to the rates, because it was all packaged together in our eyes. And so as we're looked at to make decisions based on the formula rate plan that was designed or orchestrated in a way to get Great River going, has it been executed? Are those stipulations again complete? And I think gentleman, I forget your name, sorry, on the left. I mean, he, again, to the best of his ability, said we don't know that they're all done yet, and that's not an accusation. I mean, we don't have it. We didn't put in evidence, and we didn't ask for it yet. So I think those are a lot of the concerns that we're trying to piggyback onto this to this discussion, because it is at the heart of the service side of are people getting what they're paying for, and what can we do to help them, help Great River, and help the constituents and the customers have a better experience and to get what they're paying for. And I think that's the line of discussion, and that's how we're kind of trying to put it together. And again, we understand that your witnesses can answer the questions to the best of their ability, and they have.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate their willingness to entertain these questions and try to help us get to the bottom of it.
I'm going to agree with you, Mr. Chairman. So your goal is appropriate. I understand that it's important to everybody up there. It's important to our client that our customers are more than satisfied with their service, And I would suggest to you that my client has a pretty high standard of themselves in terms of the service they demand to provide to their customers. My only point is this proceeding and the procedures and rules that are applied to it is not the correct forum to adjudicate those discussions. I agree that is a good goal to pursue, and we're happy, more than happy to collaborate with the commission about investigating all of those. In fact, the stipulation that was entered into with the staff is designed to accommodate that exact goal. If you look at the stipulation, what we've agreed to do is, one, provide quarterly accounting reports to the staff so that they're not dumped with all of our detailed accounting documentation all at one time once a year to help their workload out. Two, the staff and the company have agreed to develop a reporting regimen on the work that they plan to do, the work that is currently underway, and the work that is completed. We used to have a reporting requirement with the old commission that was discontinued with the last rate order. Okay, we used to do that every 6 months, but we agree that even that was probably not sufficient to make our regulators comfortable with what exactly is going on in terms of service repairs and service providing. We are happy to address at any time any complaints that customers raise. If we know about them, we will respond and provide you the information we have. But to adjudicate that in real time with the wrong witnesses in a rate hearing is the basis of my series of objections.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Commissioner Carr?
I'm sorry, Ricky. Mr. Cox did remind me, we also stipulated to what's called a management review. And so the commission has the authority to institute a management review every 5 years for certain types of utilities. I don't think it actually technically would apply to Great River because it's lower than the threshold. I'd have subject to check. But the point is we have voluntarily agreed to undertake a management review, which would do exactly what Commissioner Carr is attempting to do here today. That is the exact procedure. It is in statute. That's what it's designed to do. And we have agreed to undertake one.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Commissioner Carr, any follow-up questions?
But you're asking us to, I'm sorry, go ahead, ma'am.
Leo, I don't recall exactly what their answer was when asked if they achieved, everything committed to in the prior stipulation. Could they respond to that? And you can object to my asking the
Yeah,
question.
I don't object. I just want to clarify. You mean the stipulation that was agreed to in the previous 2022 rate case?
Yes,
Yes.
the commitments in the prior rate case, have those been accomplished?
Let me, if you don't mind, can I provide a copy of the stipulation that was in that case to Mr. Silas and give him, 30 seconds to take a look at it?
Yes. Granted.
Thank you.
I tell you what, while you look at that, y'all want to take a 5-minute break? Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. Mr. Manuel, or Mr. Salas, you're recognized to answer the question. Thanks.
Yes, sir. Thank you for allowing me to take the time. It's a long document, so just wanted to make sure I fully understood it. The short answer is yes. Great River has complied with every single item that was stipulated in the last rate case. A lot of the stipulations were about this specific proceeding, the FRP proceeding. And then in terms of the service rules and regulations, those were all stipulated in our tariff based on various amendments, which we have complied with. It's in our tariff. We are using those to inform every kind of decision and operational decision we make. So short answer is yes, we have complied with all the stipulated items in the rate case.
Okay. Any other questions, gentlemen? Any other questions? This point, Mr. Manuel, you redirect.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be as brief as we can. Last night we tried to organize this to be efficient. I do actually want to start though with the copies of letters that Commissioner Carr mentioned this morning related to a drinking water notice of some kind. Mr. Silas, there was some question about the language in this letter, and I don't want to get you out past your skis or what you know or don't know, but do you have any idea what's the starting point or basis point for the language in this letter?
I do. As the head of the communications department, we've spoken with the compliance department about this a couple times. The basis of the language is based on EPA requirements. So there's a lot of language in here that we are truly just not allowed to change.
Okay, you don't know what sentences are EPA mandated versus not, but that is the point is that's what informs the content of the letter.
Correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Silas, yesterday during the public witness session, there were several constituents and customers that provided comments to the commission prior to the commencement of this evidentiary hearing. I know you were in attendance, as were others, to listen. I know you've endeavored to try and look into as many of the comments that were made as you can and report back to this commission what you can. And so I want to give you an opportunity to just sort of go through what you were able to figure out basically last night at the conclusion of our recess until now.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm able to do is look up customers and all of their service concerns and their call logs and the call recordings and the work orders by account number, by service address, by name. Sometimes those names don't match up exactly in our system from what they wrote down or what they said. So I'll speak in terms of service areas instead of individual customers. But the first is, we all heard from a customer of the Canebrake facility about their water bill being higher than the electric bill. We chatted about that a little bit earlier today. I was able to determine that customer's concerns were due to the what I'll call unusually high levels of water usage of consumption. So those range anywhere from 11,000 gallons a month to 30,000 gallons a month, which is much higher than I would expect to see. So for that one customer, I was able to find that information. We heard from the Oakland community, various customers from the Oakland community. I did want to reaffirm that we did enter into a stipulation with staff to test and replace those meters as necessary to get those customers onto the consumption-based rate in Oakland. So that is ongoing. We have the stipulation. We're actively working for that community to address their concerns there. We heard from a resident of Oakland that there were 10 to 15 boil water advisories in a given month. I was able to confirm that there have been 4 boil water advisories year to date for the Oakland community. 2 of those were caused by service interruptions from the water provider, from Natchez Waterworks. So those, I was able to confirm that. I was also able to confirm via our customer confidence report, which is really a water quality report that we have on our website. We mail out directly to customers once a year as required, that the water is safe, healthy to drink, not contaminated, as we heard. So I was able to confirm that as well.
Mr. Silas, is that report sent to every water customer you have in the state, not just Oakland, right?
It is. It's into every water customer in the state, and in this particular situation, for a pass-through system, we send Natchez Waterworks consumer confidence report to our customers. So yes, it is based on the water source that they are being provided by.
And is that available on your website, maybe? I don't know.
It is. So we have, I believe, 3 trailing years of those reports available on the website if we've acquired the system, if we've owned the system for that long.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No. Yeah, I know we heard from some customers in the Red River service area about an odor from the lagoon. I was able to confirm that in October, our operations team repaired an aerator, and that aerator was the cause of the odor. A single customer did call in back-to-back 4 times within 2 days because they weren't happy with that response. Every single time we told them the status of the work order, we told them the resolution of the work order, and the customer simply was not happy. Wanted to speak to a different representative. So I know we did hear, I had to call back 6 times. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's because either they don't like the answer or they want to speak and see if they get the answer from a different individual. So I was able to confirm that. I will, maybe pass to Jake to see how repairing an aerator can cause an odor, because I don't know that specifically, but I know that was the cause in our work order process.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. So depending on how long the aerator's off, what will happen is the wastewater in the lagoon can go septic. And so once you turn the equipment back on, it starts stirring all that up. Those septic odors at the bottom of the lagoon can come up and go into the air. So that's typically what happens.
Two more service areas left, so I'll try and keep it relatively brief. We heard from the Wool Market or Plumber or Superior service area, you can call it any of those names, regarding a number of BWAs and some water quality concerns. I was able to identify the community has been issued 3 BWAs year to date. I was able to verify that we received our first water quality complaint. We've owned the system for many months. We received our first water quality complaint in May, which is after the rates increased. Each time these have been researched and addressed as they've come up. The large majority of them, I wasn't able to get through every single call that we've had. The large majority of them have been able to clear up with flushing, just the customer flushing their lines. I'll again let Jake tell me if I'm wrong here. My understanding, subject to check, is that a lot of the time when simple flushing can clear up the water quality problem, that's due to sediment in the customer's lines or a buildup in a customer's water heater, which is not the source water that we provide, but instead the pipe and the lines that are on the customer side. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, we as a general practice, that's why flushing is done in distribution systems, is to keep the water age, or keep the age of the water, as fresh as possible, because when the water gets old, You know, a lot of different things can happen. It reacts with, you know, materials in the pipes and water heaters and those kind of things. So, yeah, it's just a general rule that we have in distribution systems is to flush lines and keep that water fresh. So that can happen in houses as well.
We also heard from a customer of the Superior or the Woolmarket facility about her concern with meter reading dates. I was able to confirm that there was a situation in recent history where the meter reading dates went longer than the 35 days that we generally expect and is our standard. We were able to issue refunds and credits to those customers to credit them back the usage that was attributable over that 35-day time frame. So the customers did receive a letter, a separate letter about that, and a credit on their next bill. And the last service area I'd like to talk about is Wellsgate.
Wait, Mr. Silas,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. I recall yesterday there being some question as to whether meters are even being read in Superior on any regular basis. So I'm wondering what you can speak to on that issue.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I did look at that as well. Thank you for the reminder. And I'll talk about a process we have in general too. So I was able to identify that the customers of Superior are on a metered rate. The large majority of the customers have usage components of their bills, so meters are being read there. And we do have a process in place. It's SPMR, which is a smartphone kind of meter reading technology, where our meter readers have to take pictures of the usage. So in any individual situation, if a customer does have concerns about whether their meters are being read, we're able to pull pictures of that meter, of the usage, and either provide that to the customer or the commission if an investigation is needed into that.
And that's for every meter read for every customer.
I believe that's for every manual meter read. There are some that are not manual, but yes, for every manual meter read where a meter reader has to go on site, it is for all those customers.
And that practice is not unique to Superior. That is a practice that's undertaken for every system in which you have meters.
That's correct. And the final service area, Commissioner Brown, I know that you had some questions about Wellsgate. I was not able to find the specific customer that was mentioned, only because I don't have the account number or the name. I'd be happy to research if that was provided. I did look at all of the service-related calls we've gotten of Wellsgate year to date, and I was able to determine that the majority of those calls were due to boil water advisories. The pressure calls that we got actually really, really closely correlated with the boil water advisories. I'll just give a little bit of background information there. Most times, I would say the large majority of times, a precautionary boil water advisory is issued if the pressure in a system drops below a certain PSI, so 20 PSI. If there are line breaks or situations with the distribution system, the pressure drops and a precautionary boil water advisory is issued. That pressure drop, the large majority of the time, corresponded to customers calling and saying they had pressure issues. So those were fixed very quickly as soon as the line breaks were repaired, and customers were contacted and said that the pressure was back. So I did personally review quite a few of those calls, and we were able to either go out to the customer's home, help test their pressure with them there, or confirm that our system was not overcapacity is what I'll say. That might be the wrong way to say it, but our system was adequately supplying water pressure to all of those facilities whenever those investigations were conducted. So that is really the extent of the service areas in terms of the service quality.
Well, Mr. Stiles, let me ask, with respect to the Wellsgate pressure issues, just to be clear, there were certain customers that complained about systemic pressure, and do you know how many customers that was? Based on your data, or you don't?
I don't have a specific number for the Wellsgate community.
Oh, okay. But the point is that would have triggered a work order process, right?
It did.
And that work order tracks all the activity that was occurred in response to that complaint.
Yes.
Right? And all of that is available for obviously your review, but not only your review, but the commission and staff's review, the customer's inquiry as well, is what you would use that information to respond to any customer follow-up or et cetera, associated with that, right?
Yes.
Okay. I gotta go back to my notes, I apologize. Mr. Silas, you have used the term boil water advisory. I appreciate that that is different from a boil water order. And I also appreciate that the way those are treated legally in Mississippi differs with how they are treated in every other jurisdiction in which you operate. And so can you elaborate for the commission what a boil water advisory is, what a boil water order is, the difference between the two, and that's right, and to the extent you know how many of each you've had in recent past, and all of the facts and circumstances that surround that.
Definitely. So, boil water order is a sign that a contaminant has been found in the water, right? So, if there's a sample that's pulled and there was E. coli in the water, a boil water order would have to be issued. Great River has had 0 boil water orders to date. So that means that every time we've pulled a sample, we have not found any kind of indication that there was a harmful contaminant that would require our water customers to boil their water. The difference with a boil water advisory is that those are truly precautionary. So we utilize EPA's best practices, best standards across our entire footprint, which, as I mentioned before, is really that pressure drop. Whenever the pressure in a distribution system drops below 20 psi, there is a potential for contaminants to enter into the system. And because we put the health and safety of our customers at really the forefront of all that we do, we make sure that we're transparent with those customers. We let them know that they're on a precautionary boil water advisory. We explain what happened, whether that's a line break, pressure drop, pump failure, whatever it was, they are notified of that. What I'll say there is, after a boil water advisory, we have to pull samples of the system to make sure there are no contaminants. So, while there's a potential for contaminants to get into the system, we pull samples to ensure that that is not the case, and we have never failed one of those samples. So all of the boil water advisories we've done have been truly precautionary, truly in an attempt to be transparent to the customers and ensure that really their safety is at the forefront of what we do.
Now, Mr. Silas, Great River has met with the Mississippi Department of Health about the regulations that apply in Mississippi as it were with respect to BWAs and BWOs. And so, do you know what was learned in that discussion?
I do. It was learned that Mississippi is really the only state in our footprint that does not require water utilities to meet those EPA best practices of the pressure dropping.
Okay, and so what that means is all of the water utilities in the state of Mississippi are not required to issue boil water advisories if they have a pressure drop, consistent with the EPA regulations.
Consistent with the best practices, correct.
What is your understanding about the practice of the other water utilities in Mississippi generically about to what extent, if ever, the boil water advisories are issued? And you can limit that answer to just the systems that you've acquired and the owners prior to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think we heard from a customer yesterday that said in the 30 years that they had been serviced by a previous utility that we acquired, they got 3, right? I would say that there probably should have been many, many more BWAs if they were going to follow the EPA's best practices.
Okay, and so a perceived increase by your customer base of boil water advisory receipts could be construed incorrectly that their water quality is worse now than it was under the previous owner. Would you agree with that?
I do. A lot of the service quality calls that we get are specifically related to BWAs. We've done blogs, informational posts, communication of trying to educate customers on the difference. But yes, a lot of the service quality calls we receive are BWA related.
Okay. And again, just to reiterate, the water quality that you are serving your customers is communicated to your customers through the annual reports you mentioned. I forgot the name of them.
Yes, they're called CCRs, the Consumer Confidence Report.
And you test the water regularly per the regulations as required.
Correct.
And the Department of Health also has, periodic tests or inspections or what have you, correct?
Subject to check, I believe so. I don't know the specifics of the Department of Health's in checking or sampling.
Mr. Freeman, we had a fair amount of discussion about the Wellsgate work that's been done and the problems that persisted there. Because of the format here, it's no one's fault, but it's difficult to get a cogent story about what happened there. And so I just want to give you a minute to describe in your own words what your understanding of the history of the Wellsgate system is since Great River took over and what you believe the current operating status of that system is.
Sure. Yesterday, there was, I'll start off with, there was a discussion about the number of wells on our water production site where the storage is. We have 2 wells. There's only been 2 wells there. One was unpermitted, one was permitted when we took over. Now they're both permitted. They're both supplying water to the system, to the distribution system. There's a test hole up on a hill in that neighborhood that we do not own. I don't believe there's a pump or anything in it, but I think that's what's caused a little bit of confusion. It's not tied into our distribution system. It's not part of the production well assets that we have in that system. The other thing I'll clarify is yesterday I mentioned that it took us several months to get the unpermitted well, the larger capacity well, back in service. Approved through the state, get it tied in properly, get all the controls. That was actually more about a week time frame and not several months. So it was a little sooner than I could recall on the fly. And then the other thing I will mention is, because we got the other well back online, or got the well permitted and online very soon, and got the rainforant tanks on site to increase capacity. The period of time was very short when we were having water issues, water supply issues, and we were able to get that back up and running. And since we spent a lot of time maintaining that pressure and monitoring the supply in the storage tanks, the temporary tanks, and since that time, and since we've been able to upgrade that facility and get the proper capacity and get everything tied in properly, get the additional treatment, pressure and supply have been more than adequate in that system.
Okay. I guess, Mr. Freeman, along the same lines, there was a fair amount of discussion about the water systems that Great River took over earlier this year in Jackson County, and sort of the quote-unquote brown water complaints and concerns of that customer base. And so I would ask if you could elaborate on your understanding, to the extent you have it, about the history of that problem, that issue, what Great River's approach to it is and has been, and what principles guide that entire process.
Yeah. So I mentioned it. Our three-tier approach, I'll call it, but kind of discombobulated, or not discombobulated, but at different points of the hearing yesterday. So I'll just kind of go back and summarize it all in one. So our initial option, which is our general SOP, if you will, is go in and see if we can rectify issues with simple repairs and operational improvements. You know, take care of the low-hanging fruit, if you will. So that was our first, you know, attempt to correct the brown water issues at Gulf Park Estates and Palmetto and Ocean Beach.
Is that a viable option at other systems? I mean, is that?
Yes, we've actually been pretty successful with that. You know, on the water side and on the probably more predominantly on the wastewater side, we'll go in and find that you know, previous operators didn't really understand you know, wastewater treatment or water treatment, and you know, they weren't using equipment that was there that was supposed to be used, or they weren't you know, dosing chemicals correctly, or you know, there's a whole lot of different things that can go on operationally to where a system won't work the most efficiently that it can. But yeah, that is something that we see quite often, which is good, because you know, we may have had a plan to spend a bunch of money to do major upgrades, and we go in with simple operational fixes. We're able to get the system to a point where we don't have to spend that money anymore.
Okay, and so that's option number one, and that's the option that the company initially pursued, because that's by far the lowest cost option.
Yes. So the second option we looked at was you know, to follow suit with a lot of the other water producers in that area, which is to install reverse osmosis units, which essentially remove everything from the water to the point where it's basically distilled water. Because of how that system is laid out, there are 7 to 9 wells that are scattered throughout the distribution system. So to be able to treat the water there, you'd have to install many separate RO units, which would be very expensive, or you would have to run raw water mains back to a centralized location and install one larger unit, or you know, maybe 2 larger units, which would entail you know, purchasing property and running all those mains. So that's also a very expensive option. So option 3, which is,
Wait, before we move to option 3,
yeah, sorry.
let's put an order of magnitude here. For option 2, meaning to treat the water internally amongst ourselves with RO equipment and or piping, are we talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars?
No, we're talking about millions of dollars.
Okay.
You know, probably in the realm of 4 to 6 million. I think it's the estimate I roughed out.
Okay. All right. So then what's option number 3?
So option number 3, and the option that we are currently pursuing, is to connect to Jackson County. And I don't believe I mentioned it yesterday when we discussed it, but we actually have an executed memorandum of understanding with Jackson County. So, you know, just to show, you know, how serious we are about moving forward with that option, but we entered into that with them as an initial first step to, you know, be able to share the information we needed to come up with a plan of, you know, how exactly, where exactly to make those connections, those transfer stations, how many, and all those details.
So did Great River test the water at Gulf Park Estates to try and determine to what extent it could repair the problem under option number 2?
Yes. So as part of that, it's the RO ended up being, you know, what would need to be done. But prior to that, you know, we looked at the compliance history. There hadn't been you know, the way EPA looks at contaminants or you know, constituents in the water. They break them out into 2 separate categories. One being primary, and those are the things that affect health and safety. Those systems do not have had a violation for, I believe, over a decade for any of those items. And then there's also a category which the EPA calls the secondary contaminants, and those are things that are not an impact to health and safety, but they set a maximum level in an effort to you know, prevent any kind of, you know, off-putting, you know, odors, you know, colors, those kinds of things. So when, we looked and saw that there was, there's nothing unsafe in the water, we started testing for the, the items on the secondary contaminant list, which are the things that we typically see account for color in drinking water. Your iron, your manganese, TDS, tannins, those kind of things. And when we did extensive testing of the wells in all three of those areas, what we found was that all those levels were below the maximum level set by the EPA. And furthermore, the one that I presumed was the issue was the tannins, because that's what we've seen in other wells that have color symptoms in other areas, along the Gulf, and the tannins were actually non-detect in every sample we took.
Let's stop here for a moment. Would you agree that it's perfectly reasonable for customers to complain or be concerned, to the extent they're uneducated about the EPA regulations you talked about their water having a odor or tint to it? I mean, is that a common complaint in areas where you have experienced this in the past?
Yes, it is, and I mean, it is colored water is not what we're used to, and it is off-putting, but it is not unsafe.
Okay. Now, do you know where the Jackson County Utility Authority gets their water, and how are you satisfied that that will actually help to resolve the issue that we're talking about?
Yes, so Jackson County, and this is, information that they provided to us, in some of our discussions. They've been in the area, obviously, a long time and are familiar with this issue. So what they had done was go to the north end of the county, and I presume through a process of drilling test holes, they were able to locate and test a separate aquifer. And I want to say it's maybe 10 miles north of I-10, I believe, somewhere around there. So they were able to find a separate aquifer that doesn't have the same issues with the color, and that is where they supply all the water to the southern part of the county.
Okay. So is it your opinion that the color and odor issues complained of by customers are really a result of the ultimate source of the water, and there's really nothing from an operational standpoint, given your current equipment, that can be done to address that permanently?
No, there isn't anything we can do temporarily. Obviously, we're working towards a final solution, but because through all of our testing, we're not seeing that the color is caused by something else in the water other than potentially some of the TDS. The other typical constituents in water that would could cause discoloration, they're just not there at levels that would require it. So that therein leads to the only option to remove the color from the source water that's coming out of the ground in that area would be a reverse osmosis treatment unit.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Freeman, I'd like to transition to a line of questioning that Commissioner Carr had yesterday, where he essentially said, "Look, if you rated systems 1 to 10 in terms of their compliance or their operational efficiency or their state of repair, how would you grade each system?" And of course, you've got over 130 systems, some of which have lots of equipment associated with it. That's difficult to do in this setting. But I would just ask you, can you expound upon kind of Central State's area of expertise in this area nationwide, what its experience in Mississippi has been, and kind of explain that we've got some systems that we've had longer than others, and what state of repair or disrepair each are in as a result of that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'll start with like to expound on you know, kind of the worst of the worst that we've seen. We have acquired 27 facultative lagoons. Those are lagoons that have no mechanical treatment at all. They don't have disinfection on the back end. A vast majority of them are single cell lagoons, which the state does not allow to be installed anymore for reasons that they can't, you know, they don't have the mechanism to treat and then settle out so that, you know, clean treated water can come out the back end. So what ends up happening at these lagoons, and a handful of them, or actually all of the systems that we took over that were not charging rates, these would all be in this group that I'm discussing. So what'll happen over time is the sludge will just build up in the single cell lagoon, and I've seen many of them that the sludge is actually breaching the surface. You know, you can see it, and what happens at that point is you've taken up all the volume in the lagoon. So whatever small amount of treatment that Mother Nature could have provided originally is no longer happening, and the raw, you know, basically raw wastewater is just short-circuiting the lagoon and going out the back end. You know, that's dumping sludge, you know, raw sewage basically into the creek. We've seen this in other areas where, you know, when you have a system that's not treating, it's going out in the creek. You can find, you know, bloodworms, you know, pathogens. The E. coli levels are extremely high. So if that is dumping into a creek where, you know, maybe kids play, you know, or it flows down to another body of water where, you know, could be recreational, those kind of things. You know, it's a very, very bad situation. So, you know, in those circumstances, if you do any upgrades to those systems, because they're basically grandfathered in, the state will make you, you know, either do away with it altogether, depending on the permit limits. What we've been able to do instead of that, a more economical approach is to install a baffle. It's basically a curtain wall to separate that single cell into two cells, and install aeration to where we can there treat the wastewater in the first part of the cell and then allow the sludge to settle out on the back end before the clean water on the top goes out and gets disinfected to meet all the permit limits.
For the systems you acquired in Mississippi, did most of those systems have some order of environmental noncompliance associated with them?
Yeah, I would say, you know, basically all the wastewater systems had some form of noncompliance, you know, to varying degrees.
Okay. Now, some of these systems you've owned for 2 or 3 years now, and you've obviously done some work, changed operating practices, et cetera. And so, has Great River been able to convert systems from non-compliant and failed to compliant and operational appropriately?
Yes, to date, we have removed 35 wastewater systems from their corresponding compliance agreements with DEQ, and I believe the number countrywide that we've removed from, you know, similar agreements that we have in other states is 335 altogether across our footprint.
Okay, and to be clear, that means that facility is operating within its existing environmental permit limits, and that's checked and tested by the DEQ, and it is compliant.
That is correct.
Okay, Mr. Teese, let me move to you. We tried to describe for the commission and for the public and our customers sort of the problem that exists. The microcosm of which was just described by Mr. Freeman, but let's talk about Central State's approach to this issue, why it does what it does, what the issue is in Mississippi or perhaps in all the states that you operate. And I really most importantly, what other options exist other than Great River or somebody like Great River to address them?
Yeah, so, our mission statement is bring safe, reliable water and wastewater services, right? And so we do that over small distressed systems. And so, different states have different mixes of these, but certainly the state of Mississippi, the other states where we operate, there are a bunch of these systems, right? And
Can you get closer to the mic?
sorry.
I'm sorry.
And as Mr. Freeman mentioned, the ones we have acquired in the state of Mississippi were all violators, all some state of failure in terms of environmental condition and the other components of compliance that they were not successful in. And so when we entered Mississippi, we knew this was a problem. And I think Commissioner Brown explained earlier that he understands the prior commission and everyone in the state knew that, hey, there's a problem here with these systems. And so I think what part of that reality is that Great River was a solution, and it turns out the only solution in a lot of these situations. And there's a system that is on my mind, Le Papillon, right, that is near Hattiesburg, and no one else wanted that system. It was in really bad shape, had a spray field situation going on that was violating. No one else wanted that system, right? And so Great River was the solution. And so I think when we think about, what we heard yesterday, what we've talked about so far, there's a narrative there that is obviously negative, but I think the larger narrative is we are a solution that is needed to a problem that is really big. It's not just in Mississippi, but it's everywhere, and it's the noncompliance, it's the failure of water and wastewater infrastructure everywhere.
Yeah, and so, Mr. Teese, so to take Le Papillon, that's a spray field treated system in the Hattiesburg area. And what is your understanding about the city of Hattiesburg or the county's appetite to take over that system?
Yeah, we understand that no one else wanted to take over that system, even though they'd had opportunity to for maybe some time.
And neither the commission nor any other body can force anybody to take these systems. Is that your understanding?
That's correct. That's correct.
And so maybe maybe Mr. Freeman knows, I don't know. So we took Le Papillon over, and how did we solve, or what is the status of the resolution with respect to that system? Does anybody know?
Yeah, so what we were able to work out was to tie on to the city of Hattiesburg. They had a main line and also, I believe, a lift station, but it's on the other side of the highway. So we had to work through, all the easements, working with, the state to cross the highway. There's been several versions of the plans of the routing of that force main from the system to Hattiesburg, and I believe that is in permitting, almost approved. So we should be moving forward with that here pretty soon.
So, Mr. Freeman, can you talk about what a spray field is and maybe what other technical options there were to resolve that issue other than connecting to the city?
Yeah, so a spray field in general, that's one of the ways that you would have what we refer to as a non-discharging system. So a lot of most of the systems that we have in Mississippi, they discharge to a creek, to a body of water, and because of that, the state regulates the limits, contaminants that are allowed to go out and what levels. With a non-discharging system, the idea is that you treat the water to some degree, and then you apply it to the ground and use the ground to absorb that treated water, so that it doesn't go into any body of water or waters of the state. And therefore, they can be regulated by the county. It just really depends on the state and the area, what kind of regulations are on those. But yes, a spray field, you would take the water and you would spray it almost like you'd have a bunch of sprinklers that goes onto the ground, and then the ground absorbs it. And that all has to be designed because it depends on the percolation quality of the soil to the degree that it can absorb that water. So a lot of times you'll have, if they're regulated, you're not allowed to spray, if the ground's frozen, because it won't take on any of the water. And all these kind of rules are based around the idea that the whole intent is for the ground to absorb the water, because like in the instance of La Papillon, the ground was not absorbing the water and it was running down and getting into the lake. And that's really the major issue with that system.
To the extent any of you know, there were many customer complaints for the residents of that system that were complaining of odor, raw sewage in their yards. First of all, is that a failure mode for the type of system you just described, Mr. Freeman?
Yes, it can be.
Okay, and do you know whether the residents requested that Great River take over their system due to the absentee status of their now previous owner?
I think subject to check, the residents were requesting somebody take over, and Great River was the entity that was willing to do so.
Yeah. Okay. So now, going along this theme, Mr. Tees, if a system like we just described that is in absolute failure mode isn't taken over by Great River in Mississippi, what other options exist?
I mean, in this case, and, I think in most of these cases, there isn't another option. So, the degradation just continues indefinitely until there is an option, right? So think about what people were experiencing in their yards, what was happening in that lake. I don't know the type of lake. We think about lakes and creeks if kids play in them or they're used for recreational use. That's a major human health hazard, right?
Are there any federal funds available to help these types of situations that you're aware of?
Not that we're aware of for these private utilities. We've applied for some things and have not had access, and there's just, nothing available that we're aware of for private utilities to make these kind of repairs.
Okay. And now, to be fair, not every system acquired by Great River in Mississippi has been in the level of disrepair of some of the systems we've been talking about. Would you agree with that? There's a spectrum of disrepair, if you will.
That's correct.
But if you've got a system, to use Commissioner Carr's example, I think we've been talking about systems that are probably graded at like a 1 or a 2. Let's say we got a system at like 5. But the owners of that system currently have been deferring any and all maintenance associated with it because they can't afford to do the maintenance. So if Great River doesn't come in and buy that system, what happens?
Yeah, so that's a time bomb in itself, right? So a 5 becomes a 4, becomes a 3, becomes a 2 over time. And with these systems, and we talked about this yesterday, the smaller ones have a really difficult time raising any sort of capital. Someone, and I don't remember who, but was here yesterday talking about the difficulty that they had in getting a rate increase, and I think that's due to some resources, just to execute standard procedure for rate cases, those kinds of things. And so it's a death spiral for these systems, right? If they're a 5 today, have no succession plans, have no access to capital, have stopped investing in the system at any level, it's a matter of time until they're a 1 or a 2.
And same general discussion can apply to water systems. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And at the end of the day, when you've got a system in Mississippi or anywhere else that on Commissioner Carr's scale is graded at a 1 or a 2, that's certainly problematic for the residents of that community from a odor or discomfort level. But does that not pose real, actual health risks to those residents and others?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Mr. Silas, let's move to a topic that I think there was a fair amount of confusion about simply because we were using percentages of percentages. So you're in charge of Great River and Central States, customer communication department. So can you please reiterate or describe sort of the calls that Great River receive, the types of calls, and any data you have in a somewhat succinct manner that I think if we give you a second to speak, holistically, it might be communicated better where at least I can understand it.
Absolutely. No more percentages of real numbers this time. So we serve 19,642 individual households in the state of Mississippi. Of those 19,600, I'll say 12,200 have never called us for any reason at all. In my experience, that means they've been able to utilize our technology, our IVR system I mentioned yesterday, our website to find all the information they need, pay their bills effectively, and move on without ever having to contact us at all. That means that 7,393, to be exact with that number, have called us for some reason year to date in 2024. Of those 7,393, 1,835 of those were service related, which means they could be calling about a boil water advisory to get an estimate on when that's going to be lifted. If they notice a leak in their customer's yard, I've seen that. If they notice a leak on the side of the road, they'll call us. They're not all in terms of water quality, in terms of brown water or some of the things that that Mr. Freeman has mentioned today. So to summarize that, 1,835 out of 19,642 customers have called us for any kind of service-related issue, which would include just simple inquiries about a boil water advisory or to notify us of a leak.
And with respect to all of those calls, because that's a service call, that triggers a work order within your organization and follows the same procedure we've been discussing the last 2 days. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Any kind of emergency, which would be a leak or a brown water complaint or any of those service-related issues, would trigger a work order process where operations, customer service, sometimes engineering is looped in, all work together to identify the cause, a potential solution, and a resolution for the customer.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. So certain calls that are classified as a service call may just be an inquiry of information that's settled at the call. So if somebody says, is a BWA still ongoing, you answer that question yes or no or what have you, and that doesn't trigger a work order necessarily. Is that right?
Correct. If we know that there's a boil water advisory out there and we know the cause, then it's generally resolved on the phone. I would say a large portion of that 1,835 calls are customers calling about the same event, right? So I would say I'll use, just because I looked at it yesterday, I believe it was in May, the Superior system had a boil water advisory, and in the span of 1 day, 50 customers called us about that one event, right? And so those were easily handled. Yes, you're on a boil water advisory. We expect it to be lifted in 2 business days. That's an example. But 50 of those 1,835 were the same event, easily kind of communicated to customers, and did not trigger a completely separate work order process for all 50 of those calls.
Okay. I can't remember who asked the question, but somebody asked, how many operators we have or how many employees our contractor H2O Innovations has. Does somebody have that information?
Yes, I do. It's they have 375 across the state.
Okay.
And this is H2O.
And those employees are available to service any any system Great River owns anywhere in the state.
Yeah, there would be, typically there'd be an operator, I'll say assigned, or a few operators assigned, operators, operational personnel, 2 systems, and then you have the large group of additional personnel employed by H2O that are available for calls for work orders, resolution of inquiries and work orders.
Okay. With respect to the model employed by Great River of having an operator, what data do you have to demonstrate that model is working with respect to a service request by a customer, whether it be emergency or otherwise, how that service is going, et cetera, and how do you check up on it?
I was able to pull emergency service order, emergency work order data. I know that was a question yesterday. So an emergency work order necessitates an operator being on site within 45 minutes to an hour. What I saw is last month, in the month of November, we had 88 emergency work orders that were opened, and the average time to complete those work orders was 2.5 hours, which means that the operator was able to get on site, communicate with the customer, fix the issue, sometimes with heavy machinery, sometimes by bringing equipment with them because they knew the route of the call, and close out the situation with the customer all within 2.5 hours of that initial call. So that is, again, in the month of November, 88 of those.
Yeah, but to be fair, that's an average, right?
Correct.
So some could have taken longer, for sure.
Yes.
And of course, that response time has to vary based upon what the problem is. Would you
Absolutely.
agree with that?
I would.
And so by virtue of that, it's really important to understand what is the root cause of the service complaint, what is the solution to that, and what's a reasonable time to respond to that specific circumstance. Would you agree?
Yes.
Now, with respect to Great River's business model of having an outside contractor handle day-to-day operations that's managed by your regional group, can someone speak to why you believe that's at least par, if not a better approach than what customers were used to under their prior ownership, where they may have had an owner that owned one or maybe just a few systems that were all local, and so they may have had just a couple of local employees that they know and could talk to and reach out to.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit yesterday about, how, trying to employ people when you're this geographically disparate as we are. You've got 130-something systems, but they are literally all over the state, is a tough thing financially. But I think, contrast that to, Jake's number of 375 employees in the state, and they're also spread all over the state. And obviously not all of those are full-time dedicated to Great River-owned systems, but they're available in the event of emergencies, available in the event that something goes on that they have a particular expertise to cover. And so, with these systems, increasing federal requirements for under the Clean Water Act to detect contaminants and those kinds of things, increasing expertise is needed. And so, H2O in this case, but a contract operations model allows for that expertise to be there and be on site and be there to make the necessary repairs. In addition to specialized types of employees, welders and electricians and those kinds of things that are not just water or wastewater operations folks.
Now, if the commission or staff were interested in evaluating whether that model is appropriate for Mississippi, they could do that. I mean, there are studies that can be done to analyze that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in another jurisdiction, which was similarly spread out across the state, we were asked to do a comparison of what it would look like to bring these services in-house and to use the contract operations model. And it produced the result that it would be more expensive to bring that all in-house. And so we certainly could provide the same analysis for the state of Mississippi.
And to be fair, things change. You could acquire more systems that are more clustered, and so you could you could change your approach in the future when circumstances change, but is it your opinion right now that the model adopted is the most reasonable and cost-effective model for Great River at this time?
It is, and I think, a change would depend on having the critical mass of connections and service areas in a certain area, which, we don't believe we're there yet in Mississippi. But as you say, things can change, and with continued acquisitions, it could.
Okay, so, Mr. Tees, appropriately so, the commission has asked several questions about the level of rates that are being considered here or already being charged, and the affordability of certain customers to pay those rates. And so let me ask you, what options exist to address the customer affordability issue?
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because what was going through my head yesterday around this issue was there's a program on the energy, electric, gas side called LIHEAP, which it's a federal program that affords low-income folks the opportunity to get assistance with their heating bills, right? And so during COVID, there was a similar federal program called LIWAP that allowed customers to have access to federal grant money to help pay their water and wastewater bills. And we had a number of customers. I'm not familiar with exactly how many in Great River, but across our footprint, we had customers take advantage of that program. It is now done. There is nothing like that currently at the federal level. We, as a company, even as individuals, have written letters and advocated for that program to exist. And so, since that doesn't, the other options are something that would happen at the state level, right? Because there's nothing federally that's available. So what could happen at a state level? And I think we're certainly open to conversations and input from the commission on how to tackle that issue. I think the thing to remember when you do, though, is a cost of service or revenue requirement is a round number, and so to reduce something for one customer kind of puts it back in the pool for everyone else to absorb. It's a cross-subsidization of sorts, which is really difficult. And you have issues in a program like that of vetting customers as to their income levels and those kinds of things. So you got to set those levels, and then you've got to have the administrative infrastructure to vet folks and make sure that they qualify for those programs.
So, Mr. Teese, you've testified already that you believe the costs of Great River that are being reviewed in this proceeding are reasonable, that the resulting rates are just and reasonable. And so one of the ideas that's been suggested today is let's just lower the rates because people can't afford them. And so I'll ask you, I mean, Great River's made some proposals in that regard in the stipulation that may not be sufficient for some of our regulators. So I'll ask you, is there an opportunity for Great River to materially reduce the rates that are currently being charged and proposed and under review in this proceeding?
Yeah, so we have proposed, the three options that we discussed yesterday, and we're certainly open to that. But, ultimately, in a proceeding like this, we're submitting our numbers and, to sum up the cost of serving these customers for water and wastewater service. And when we do that, we use the templates provided, and then, staff and consultants agreed with all of those numbers. And I think, we're confident, and I think, the stipulation shows that, staff is confident as well that the numbers as presented are the cost of service. And so from that perspective, there isn't anything magic to say we reduce rates without some other consequence, right? And, Great River entered the state in 2021. Our accumulated losses are $5 million in this state, and part of that includes these RIMRA mechanisms that reduce rates temporarily for customers. I mean, that's cash, and it comes from somewhere, and it's deferred. So we can get something later, but today it's a cash problem, right? And so I think there's a reality that the cost of service has been reviewed and vetted, and it is what it is. And so there's limited ability to just reduce rates without acknowledging what that means for the company either today or down the road.
So what happens if the rates proposed in this proceeding are not approved or just are sort of unilaterally lowered? What is Great River's options or, you know, what consequences result from that?
Sure. So, Great River's obviously, a business, and so we, like everyone else, would have to pay the bank first. We talked yesterday about the debt that we have, and so we would have to make sure that the bank gets their payments, gets their interest and principal, and then the operators would come next. And so making sure that the day-to-day operations are met, the samples are taken, the sites are visited, the checklists are done, all of those things would have to happen. And once you get past that, depending on what cash is available is the cash that we would be able to use to continue the maintenance and continue the improvements that we have talked about here. And so you risk another cycle of deferred maintenance, right? And we would risk being out of compliance with those 2-year agreements that we have talked about in terms of with the environmental regulator. We have 2 years to make those improvements. And so there are a lot of significant risks.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, that's all the redirect we have.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. At this point, we'll see if our interveners have any statements or questions. Mr. Arnold?
I came into this whole thing with one agenda, and that's the rates are too darn high. And I've learned a little bit that this is complicated. The system has fallen into disrepair partially, largely perhaps, because I mentioned earlier in one of my statements that the Wilco rates were maybe even downright generous. Well, now maybe I know why they were downright generous. They couldn't get the increases. They didn't have the infrastructure, didn't have the resources to hire consultants and to help them go through the system that they're required to go through to get the rates. But that's where we hear. That's where we are right now. Whatever happened, that's where we are. I think everybody would agree it has to be fixed. And perhaps there are things we could do, but if we're going to fix it, either the government's got to jump in and run everything, and I haven't been real encouraged by what happens when that happens over my 73 almost year life. So companies are going to have to do it. The companies are going to have to make a profit to do it. Perhaps there's some things they could do. Back off perhaps on some of the rate increase and slow the repair rate down. But I think Mr. Thies just kind of addressed that's fairly difficult, and we do run the risk of continuing the cycle that we're in. Public Service Commission perhaps could allow some rate increase, not allow all of it that they want, but again, we're still back to the same complicated problem. Can we get the job done and still do that? I think the biggest thing that I want to take away is that I came here thinking Great River was run by a bunch of horned demons in St. Louis. Not so sure that's completely true anyway right now. I appreciate what the commission is doing in trying to talk this through and come up with a viable solution. I think for a long-run solution that's going to help everybody, there are things that perhaps the state can do. Perhaps the state can release some of that $600 million funds that they have in surplus to maybe help out. I realize that by law right now that can't happen. Perhaps the laws could be changed. Perhaps there are things that could be done legislatively to make this more tenable to the customer, because the customers are suffering. Maybe some law changes for the federal government. He said the relief people got during COVID, those possibilities are all gone. I don't know how much more perhaps Great River could do to relieve some of the pressure on those individual customers. Maybe that's something y'all could think about. Maybe you could help those people who honestly, legitimately cannot afford the additional cost. As a last thing, the worst thing we could possibly do is develop any sort of adversarial relationship with each other, because that's just going to require more paperwork, more consultants, more proof of why things are happening the way they are. And all of those costs are just going to have to be rolled back in, because if we're going to have operating systems, we're going to have to compromise between everybody. Nobody wins 100%. Everybody gets something that works for them. Those are all kind of generalities, and it is a very complicated and very difficult problem. And I'm glad I'm not a commissioner that has to try to sort it out. But I am encouraged, because I think you gentlemen up there are working very hard on doing your best to help the customers, to help the people of the state of Mississippi. Great River, I hope, will do everything they can, and I kind of believe they will, to do that. But we've all still got to understand, if they don't make a profit, we're right back where we are right now. The reason the systems are so bad is the operators couldn't maintain them because they couldn't afford to maintain them, and they couldn't stay in business they couldn't stay in business because they couldn't make any money. And that's all I had to say. I appreciate you guys allowing me to be here, and it's been very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Appreciate your participation. I think Commissioner Stamps has a few clarifying questions to the redirect. Mr. Manning.
Thank you. You referenced ticking time bomb and death spiral. Unpack that a little bit so that we can add some color to that statement.
Can you repeat the question?
You referenced, or somebody referenced ticking time bomb and death spiral.
Yes, that was me.
Referencing some of the scenarios that we're looking at. Could you unpack those statements?
Yeah, the question I was asked was about what happens to those systems if no one takes them over. And I think what I'm saying there is, systems that today are out of compliance but still able to provide service, if no one's reinvesting and there's no succession plan, if there's an aged owner and those kinds of things, they're steps away from being in the place that some of these other systems were, with massive failures that are right in front of us. And so it's just about timing for all those systems is what I was saying. It's strong language, I get it, but that's the message I was trying to get across.
Well, I mean, I agree to some degree in several areas. I think as much as we looked at the company, I think that a lot of our energy, even though we're directing it at Great River, we need to direct it at the government, because I think the government failed. Thanks a lot, Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Stamps. Commissioner Carr, you have any?
Yeah. Referencing the dirty water issues, brown water issues that are in Gulfport Estates. Is that when the water comes out of the ground and into the tank? Is that where the issue is? Or is the issue as it leaves the tank?
No, so when we do testing, of the nature I was discussing, it is the source water as soon as it comes out of the ground. But before any, there's a number of, like with iron and manganese, you can add, there's chemicals that you can add to, keep those in suspension so they don't drop out. So when we do the testing, we are testing the source water before anything's added to it, or it comes in contact with, any other water or any other materials.
So in the initial due diligence process, were you all aware of the history of this?
We knew there was brown water, but there's, you have to go off of, at that point in our due diligence, information that is publicly available. So not necessarily, the same access to when we took the system over and we could do all the testing ourselves and know exactly what's going on.
So when y'all did your, I don't know if you can answer this question, someone. So when your initial plan came in and you got those results back, so those plans were put into the rate plan to clean the water up that you were aware of?
I'm not sure I exactly understand the question.
So were you aware when the water, I'm sorry, in your initial findings on the water, and I'm sure you did historical data too to make sure it just wasn't a one-time occurrence when you did your findings. So was that results in how to treat that water, to clean it up, or whatever you had to do to get the customers satisfied? Was that findings and that plan or that cost put into the rate plan?
I can talk about that. So the rate plan calls for a fully historic test year, meaning everything that you have spent and is in use and useful as of the end of the test year. And so because of how late it was when we bought the Gulf Park system and those, in that test year, none of those costs were included in the rates as of today. So, the operational things, and we didn't put, an estimate for reverse osmosis systems or anything like that, because it's truly a historic test year. That's what you actually have spent in the past, not anything about what you're going to spend in the future that's in these rates.
I would question the questions that we asked yesterday were similar to the questions that Mr. Leo asked. And those questions that we're asking is coming from our constituents and our citizens that doesn't have the ability to take off from work or to hire a lawyer to come up here and question y'all or to intervene. So we're here asking those questions. So the questions that are coming from myself, I can speak, are the ones that I have received since January the 5th when I was sworn in. And those questions haven't lightened up. I mean, they haven't. We heard some of the same questions yesterday. So my next comment is, what options do we have? So when you put this bottle of water up, and you put a bottle of water up that some of the customers have about brown water, which one are you going to choose when you drink it? Even y'all say it's okay to drink. Which one are you going to pick? You're asking them to pick something. They have to go out and buy that water to consume it. We've heard that testimony yesterday, or those comments yesterday, I should say.
Yep. I mean, like I stated earlier, excuse me, I am not disagreeing that the color is not off-putting, and that is why we're working towards a solution to remedy that, but it takes time. These major projects can't happen overnight. They require design, engineering, design, modeling, plans and specs to be put together, permitting to go before the state for approval. There may be easements involved. You know, we'll utilize right-of-ways as much as possible, but there's just a lot of things that go into a project like this. And that's the unfortunate truth.
So some of the wastewater lagoons or treatment process, it's not this commission's job that's not our job. Our job is not to go out and test the water. That's another part of government. So but we are getting the questions. I hope y'all understand that, everyone. We are the ones getting the questions. Our phone at our office rings and we pick it up. And if they're asking, how do you get to what the weather is today? They have been instructed to figure it out, to help them. Because people really don't know what this commission does. They don't understand it. But we still have to hear their comments and their questions and their frustration that they're struggling out there. And as y'all, in that initial rate filing, y'all had all these layers, as Commissioner Stamps commented on. We have now we're stacking layers on top of layers to get the customer satisfied. But as we add those layers, it's going up. The bill's going up. Y'all gonna come back to us and ask for a rate hike. When we haven't, in my constituents' mind, we haven't satisfied what you're asking for now. So as time moves forward, when you have these pass-throughs that we're talking about with Jackson County Utility Authority, those people, I can go ahead and tell you, when they get those new bills come in, when y'all settle that agreement with Jackson, our phones will ring off the hook, and yours also. So I just want y'all to be aware of what we are up against in our constituents. And they're very concerned about that. Another question that I asked that I'd like some clarification on. Sir, you said they had 375 systems operators? H2O, where is that? Great River, or who is that?
That's H2O, our
H2O.
third-party operations firm.
So they have 375 certified credentials operators in our state.
No, I can't answer that. That is the number of operations personnel that are available to us, you know, potentially to handle our needs.
So can you give me an example of what a certified system operator is? And how many of those is in that 375?
That number I don't know because that's not, I don't oversee them. We can absolutely get you that information, but to answer your question, a certified operator would be someone who has gone through the process with the state, taken the exams, has the work history to back up that they are, they're knowledgeable and certified and qualified to operate a certain type of system. There's tiers of operators depending on the complexity of, the wastewater, water production facility, distribution, collection. There's a lot of different tiers of certified operator. So that, there's likely within H2O a lot of different certifications of the certified operators that they have. But the exact number I can't give you right here. I just don't know.
So in your initial plan, when you gave the commission your rate filing or utility staff, and y'all, the question was asked, and I asked it yesterday, that y'all had people to take care of this. And then now we're finding you're changing the plan and you're adding other outside contractors, outside engineering firms. So how is that affecting the rate plan now versus the future? Because now the rate plan was based on y'all's comment, did y'all have enough people to take care of this? And the answer was yes. So you had to plug that number in on that yes answer to your rate plan. But now you're changing the plan and you're adding multiple layers, like Commissioner Stamp said, that can only increase because those companies have to work off a profit also. And so you're going to be adding profit on top of that. So how can we explain that to the constituents or the rate players that the plan has changed, but the money hasn't?
So I'll let Mr. Teese answer the money part. On the engineering side, we have always used third-party engineers, local engineers, to do, like I said yesterday, we work as a team to figure out the best route forward, but we have always used local licensed professional engineers in the states that we operate to put together the documents that need to go to the state for construction permitting approval and for our, for bidding for construction purposes.
So are they licensed in our state?
Yes, they are.
So these operators that we don't know who they are and these certified, are they licensed in our state?
The operators would be licensed in Mississippi, yes. But I was referring to on the engineering side with my previous comments, not the operators.
Because when, it would have been July, August, where there was some brown water issues in Gulf Park Estates, we asked for the system operator, and we never received that as up to this date. And we asked that question. My chief investigator asked that question, and we never received it. There's one other point. This is so let me open up here for a second on me. I never was a social media person till last February, so I'm learning a lot about social media, and I have a staff. They're quite younger than I am, and they're trying to teach this old dog a new trick. And so, but I got on a Sunday, and Mr. Leo knows about it, and I brought it to his attention, and Mr. Niesel and I had discussions with H2O about a lift station and sewer running out, and I shared it to my colleagues here, and that was a concern to that person because we was close. You could see the Gulf of Mexico. My question is to you, sir, has that been fixed? Is that lift station up and running as it should be? I know that's probably not in the line of questioning that I should be asking, but my constituents out there want to hear this.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that because that's not something I oversee. That's probably something that we'll have to get back with you on to look up the work order and see the resolution. We can provide that information.
Yeah, Commissioner Carr, my recollection was that that lift station had two motors, both of which were out at the same time and being rebuilt. So we had a temporary pump at that lift station. The prognosis of when we were going to get the rebuilt motors back and installed, I think should have been done by now. But we can certainly get your staff and you that answer before the end of the day as to the status of what that lift station is. But that's what the cause of the pictures and videos you sent, and that is what the results were.
So I guess the overall closing in my comments is that we have a rate plan that's before us, and we have questions from our constituents. What is our money buying us? What are we getting for this? And so what was in that initial rate plan versus now, and they don't see the value of them paying this extremely high cost from where they were. I do understand that we had some deficiencies across the state. I get that. I've seen the pictures of it. I've seen it with these. I understand. I understand, sir, the process of going through engineering and get approval. I've been there 18 months on one subdivision. That's totally, as Mr. Sampson, government is breaking down on us. I get that. We're trying to work on that. Now we have a voice, and we're trying to talk to our legislators about getting this fixed. If not necessarily fix it, let's update it. Let's get it up to where our constituents won't be ringing, the phone off the hook, so to speak. So it's just an overall concern from our constituents that they're paying for something that they don't see the value there yet. And That's in closing. And I want to thank y'all gentlemen for spending your time here with us today, and everyone that's in here. It's been eye-opening to myself that we're at this stage, but here we are. So we have to work together, as my friend over here said, to get this resolved. And we're trying to do that, but we also have people that's blowing us up over here with text messages and, emails and hollering in our ears, and we have to satisfy those. I hope y'all understand that they're the ones that are our bosses. And so, thank y'all.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask one quick question here to Mr. Thies? Basically, the problems we've got over the state, this is a set rate for sewer systems effectively, correct?
Set meaning it's
Set means
flat,
it's the same
every
for
month.
Biloxi as it is for Columbus, Mississippi.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if our system in Columbus is not requiring a lot of repair, which as far as I can see, it may or may not be, and Jacob is working on getting me that information. But if ours is not requiring a lot of repair, that means our higher rates are going to help the rest of the state effectively, because it's all kind of added together as a set across the state rate for the same kind of systems, correct?
The way consolidated rates work is, everybody's paying the same, and we experience it as more timing than nothing's done, and I'm supporting
And
someone else.
I personally don't have a big problem with that at all. I don't mind helping my neighbors down in Biloxi out. It doesn't bother me in the least, as long as something's being done to improve the system. That doesn't bother me. I still think the rates are too high, but I'm a payer, so I'm always going to think the rates are too high. Some of my neighbors may not agree with me that they don't have a problem with us helping Biloxi out. I just wanted to make sure that was clear in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. I want to thank everybody for coming out again. I know it's been a long couple days, but it's been very productive. So we've had, appreciate y'all coming and doing the best you can with questions we have. And so, Mr. Manuel.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a closing statement of any kind prepared. The only thing I would want to leave the commission with is thank you for having us here. Thank you for giving us the time to present our case. I want to thank the other interveners for their cooperation and participation. I want to thank all the constituents and customers that showed up and voiced their opinion. Those matter. And, Great River is going to do their level best to respond and to try and educate where that is necessary about the issues that all of your constituents are facing. I would just leave you with a request to study the stipulation that is on file and presented to you today. We think that it goes in the direction of putting us in a position to start to address the issues that we have discussed, and quite frankly, to reduce some of the layering that we've discussed over the last few minutes. And I just want to remind the commission that there is a stipulation between the company and the staff that is before the commission for consideration, and we just urge you to consider it seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. And again, I'll echo what you said and what my colleague said. Thank you all so much for being here, for your efforts. Appreciate y'all and your staff coming and answering our questions. And again, the constituents coming and voicing their concerns. Thanks to Ms. Secoy in the Attorney General's office, Mr. Arnold. It's been very enlightening, and there's no easy answers. So when you talk about a source of life, which is water, being delivered to our constituents, it's an issue that impacts our daily lives, and so it's going to be very emotional. And then you add cost to that, and it even gets more emotional. And so I appreciate the efforts that we've all had to try to come together and understand not only how we got here, but, you know, where we go from here, and kind of the contributing factors to what's going on. So appreciate everybody. And with this, Mr. Well, Ross, I think we'll go into executive session.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a desire from the commission to enter into an executive session. So what we would need is a motion to, for us to, the open meeting and this hearing be closed.
Commissioner Stantz had one comment before we make the
Okay,
motion.
yeah.
Hey, before we do that, I just want to make, before we go into executive session, I always like to make my comments because sometimes the people who are here after executive session is fewer people. I think there's a dire need for a transparency portal because most citizens and even elected leaders across the state don't know the true condition of the water and sewer systems and even gas systems that they base their lives on top of. So one of the takeaways I've had from this and other meetings that we've had is that we need to create a transparency portal to show people this is exactly the situation we're dealing with, because the citizens just get the service from the tap and the bill in the mail and try to get an accurate picture of the situation. And that's only a slice of the pie of what's happening. And also, beyond this case, I believe that there's systems out there that are in way worse conditions that are not inside of the Great River footprint. Just a transparency portal about all utilities, because if folks knew how bad these gas lines are and how bad these other systems are, they would change some of the tenor of how they communicate with us. I also would like to investigate the prior commission's actions. I think that it is egregious that the government put people out of business. And just as much as the fervor that we have, you know, in this case, we need to have the same microscope into what the government has done. Now, the citizens changed the governance, you know, wholeheartedly across all 3 districts, but now we have to change the government that we're supposed to govern. It also teaches us that campaign governance is bad for governing. That's woefully ineffective leadership that has happened at several levels of government, whether it be a local level or the state level. What you say on the campaign trail cannot dictate how you make decisions when you govern. And so I see some of that potentially has happened in the past, that people have carried over their campaigning to the decision-making process that they go through to make decisions in order to govern. And lastly, everybody needs to have a true appreciation to the value of water. It's valuable, it's necessary, and sometimes we don't want to pay $20 more a month for it, but do we really value it? Because we pay $10 more a month for water, for gas in the car. We don't go fight, you know, the people who raise gas prices at the gas pump. We just pay it. But we need to really value and have an appreciation to what water brings to our life and what we should pay for it. And lastly, I know it kind of felt like from the optics of it that this was a vilify or put Great River on the stake, and it wasn't my tone or tenor, and it wasn't the rest of us, but the issue is the issue that we're beating up on, not the people. We're just the people in different roles trying to function, but the issue is what we're beating up on, the issue of prior ineffective governance, which led us to the situation that we're in. So I look forward to continuing to work hard to work through it, and hopefully we can get more of our citizens to the level of understanding of this young man as we move forward. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank everyone for their time.
Thank you, Commissioner Stamps. With that, Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, for the purpose of going into an executive session, we just need a motion to go into a closed session to consider whether there's a justification to go into executive session. During that closed session, no other business can be discussed until a vote is taken on that. Following the closed session, we have to come back into an open meeting, announce the decision and the vote taken in closed session. So,
Do you have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I motion that we go into closed session to discuss going into executive session.
Thank you for the motion. Do I have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
We're
No,
just
we're
gonna
just
go
gonna
back
step
there, and then we're gonna leave.
Hello? Um, In the closed session, the commission voted 3-0. The Public Service Commission is out of executive session. No votes were taken.
Mr. Chairman, I would
Yes.
like to first thank everybody for being engaged. Folks came here from all over Mississippi, from north, south, east, and west. Experts from around the country provided, almost, 18 hours of testimony and answering questions, provided or re-provided compiled information that we have to plow through. And I believe, for me, in the best interest of Mississippi, we need to take all of this under advisement. Don't make a rush decision, make a prudent decision for the best of Mississippi. And the best thing for us to do is I move that we don't make a decision today, take this under advisement, and let it digest, let it sit, and come back at a date that you select, Mr. Chairman, to decide on this matter.
I would agree with you. We've heard 2 days of, almost 2 full days of 325 of testimony. There's a lot to digest and a lot to try to get to the bottom of. Like I said, we've read this once. We'll go through it again and try to do what's best for the people of the state of Mississippi. And so you've heard the gentleman's motion. A second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you all again, and drive safe. There's no weather north of here, so drive safely. Thank y'all.